Hi everyone. Today we're talking about Tricams. So Tricams are a fairly unique specialist piece of protection. The reason is they're not quite a nut, they're not quite a spring-loaded camming device, they're just sort of an in-between kind of hybrid. And most climbers will know what a Tricam is and have seen one, but very few climbers will actually end up owning them and racking them. So what I'm going to do is briefly go through how the Tricam works, and then we'll go through the pros and cons. So your basic anatomical components here, you've got a nylon sling, obviously. You've got the fulcrum point here, which is this sort of pointy bit on the Tricam. And then on the back you've got the rails here. So there are two ways to use a Tricam. The first is in passive mode, so if I just, say, put the Tricam in a constriction in the wall here, you can see that it works just like a nut. Any kind of downward pull on the sling will be stopped because obviously the Tricam can not travel further down. Now I can also put it in active mode or camming mode, where the sling will run parallel to the rails here. So it's running through the Tricam essentially. And if I put it like this, now any downward force on the sling will kind of encourage the Tricam to sort of rotate like this. So hopefully you can appreciate that the Tricam is, in a sense, trying to expand outwards. So if it's set in good rock or ice, any kind of downward force on the sling will basically almost make it impossible for the Tricam to come out, because it's in a sense trying to enlarge itself. And also it's particularly good in ice because, well, the manufacturer's recommendation is to set the Tricam, you actually give it a firm tug on the sling, and what that does is it actually sets the fulcrum point right into the ice or the rock, as the case may be. So it's actually quite difficult for the Tricam to be influenced by rope drag, if the sling's kind of moving around a little bit. If it's jammed right in there, it will very rarely come out. So those are two ways you can use a Tricam. Now the question is, why aren't they more popular? Why isn't everyone using Tricams? Well, as I said before, it's a specialist piece of equipment. In most situations, you're much better off, well, not better off, but it's just a lot easier to use a nut or a spring-loaded camming device. When would you use a Tricam? Well, they're most often used in protecting horizontal cracks or pockets. Basically, situations where you can't quite use a nut, and maybe you could use a spring-loaded camming device, but it's not very good, and the Tricam kind of fills those constrictions in the wall quite nicely. Now, having said that, how often realistically are you going to come across those constrictions in the wall? Not very often. It really depends on the route, where you're climbing, the rock quality and so on. But some people swear by Tricams. They think they're absolutely brilliant. And it's kind of a Marmite product, really. As I said, most climbers will never actually own one, and they'll just go with doubling up on nut sizes or carrying a few extra cams. And they're quite fiddly to place. It does take quite a lot of practice to get good at selecting a Tricam and identifying which kind of crack and constriction will be well protected by it. But having said that, it does have a few good uses. It's by no means a redundant piece of gear. And it's certainly a lot cheaper than a spring-loaded camming device. So if you are on a budget, maybe the best option for you is to double up on a few nuts and maybe get a few Tricams instead of burning your money on some spring-loaded camming devices. But it's certainly worth checking out. I'll certainly be taking a few with me to the crag, but there is your basic Tricam.